So hello everyone, my name is Julia Apostolopoulou. Sorry, I just want to make sure I'm sharing the correct screen. Okay. So a little bit about me first. I think it's always nice to know a few things about the person speaking to you. Okay, so I live here in Athens with my family of boys. They're all boys. I mean, even the dog is a male. I'm a fitness and nutrition enthusiast. I have a passion for horseback riding. Sorry, can everyone hear me? Can somebody please reply because, okay, I'm not muted. We hear you, super. Okay, so I have, as I said, I'm a fitness and nutrition enthusiast. I have a passion for horseback riding. I have over 20 years of experience in the field of digital design. My academic background combines degrees in applied psychology and digital design. And I'm always trying to figure out how the human brain works, what it needs to feel safe, happy on a computer or on another digital device. I currently work at SafeSize. SafeSize is a Greek scale-up that helps consumers find the best fitting shoes with a 3D foot scanner in retail stores, shoe stores, obviously, and also our mobile foot scanning app, which does the same thing, but in 3D. So if you stick with me during the next 30 minutes or so, I'll be discussing what user experience actually is. I'll take you through the process of a UX designer. And finally, I'll give you some pointers as to how UX designers and you lovely developers can have a better alignment and achieve a better product outcome in general. So what does a UX designer even do? Don't they just make things pretty? If you ask around, you might get, a whole bunch of ideas. Some people might say, oh, spot those vegetarians walking around with a MacBook under their armpit. Or isn't that the team that draws all day? Or, oh yeah, the dude who thinks C# is a kitchen gadget. Well, maybe we're some of that, but not exactly. In reality, a UX designer's main objective is to achieve the optimal and smoothest interaction of a human with a digital device. So, in other words, the experience needs to be so seamless that you don't even realize that there is a design in place. So aren't UI and UX the same? First off, let's clarify. UI refers to the user interface, and it's clearly what the designer depicted as a solution. It is indeed the prettiness of a product, but UX is more of an umbrella term, and that encompasses a wide range of tools that UXers use in order to be able to design the user interface. So UI is part of the UX process, and it's not a separate task. So, in this image, we can see that the designer has designed to be the user journey, but what the user has actually chosen to do with the journey is part of the user experience finding. So this is a classic case where the users were observed using the product differently than what it was designed to do. So great UX isn't a product of your imagination. It's a product of extensive research. It's careful planning, it's repeated testing, and many trips back to the drawing board. So how do you make sure this process is as efficient as possible? You can't be certain you're designing. How can you be certain you're designing with your users in mind and not with what you think is the best solution from your own experiences? So the US process, or sometimes referred to as design thinking process, has a sequence of steps a designer must take to ensure optimal product outcomes. First of all, the first step, as you can see here on the diagram on the right, is to understand. So understand who your user is and what it is they're trying to solve when they're using your product. So ideally, we will need to go out and do some actual field research to get these questions answered. Talk to potential users, identify what they like, how old they are, do they have kids, what's their income, what type of phone do they have, how computer savvy are they? These questions will help us understand our persona. So we will better understand who our user is, and that might also help us, make better design decisions for that person. Obviously, we're not going to always ask these questions. It always depends on what we're trying to find. We need to empathize with our users. As a designer, one of the key attributes as to whether we do a good job or not is how well we can empathize with our users. We need to really be able to understand what the user is trying to achieve by using our product and what it is that frustrates them or makes their task difficult. Whether that's buying a new shoe online or whether that might be, maybe they're using your product in their daily work, like a back office system, for example. So we try to understand in this first phase. Deliverables in this first phase can include user interviews, surveys, market research, or competition analysis, ethnographic studies, shadowing, stakeholder interviews, customer workshops. You might need to do all of these, or you might need to do just some. The more you do, the better of an understanding you'll get, and the easier your job will be in the next step of the process. So ideation workshops, storyboard mapping, these are just some examples of the previously mentioned deliverables. Here are a couple and what they might look like. So the product team involved would gather together in a room and spend a few hours, doing an ideation workshop, or so. It can also be done nowadays online using tools like Miro, FigJam, or Mural. Ideas, people gather around, state different ideas for certain problems that need to be solved. And then these ideas are sorted in different columns to depict entities of ideas or needs, and then further investigated. The next step is the design phase. We'll then sketch up a few wireframes to communicate our design idea to stakeholders, might be, internal stakeholders, product owners, development teams, or customers even. And then we'll go and create our perfect pixel designs in a program like Sketch or Figma. No, we don't use Photoshop anymore. That was in 1999. Luckily, things have evolved. So here are some examples of wireframes and what they can look like. So you can either have low fidelity wireframes, and these are hand-drawn sketches to quickly communicate ideas amongst the team, or you can use a design or wireframing tool to create something digital that's maybe harder to lose, or you can reference back to in the future. It's not just a piece of paper that might go missing in the future. And here are two examples of user flows. User flows will streamline your design process and set the stage for an intuitive user experience by visualizing how the user might move through the product. And it allows you, to kind of zoom out and consider the effectiveness of the overall structure. This way you can identify and address potential obstacles, or mismatches in the process. To improve the overall navigation. So you can show this either by just stating the pages and how they would flow, or you can actually show it in the design. So once you have your design ready, then you'll need to depict the flow and how the user would navigate. Then we have the validation step. The third major step of the process is to validate all the design decisions we previously did. So there are several ways UX designers validate a decision. We can either perform a moderated and qualitative user testing session, or we'll actually sit with users and ask them to perform certain tasks on our product and then assess whether the tasks were achieved or not. So did they pass or fail the task? And we'll observe if they may, for the example, have a system you know, they may, for example, use our system or product in a different way than it was intended to, or it may not even be its use the way they used it. So here's an example of a messaging tool, Viber. I'm sure you're familiar with this messaging app. Viber observed their users when they were using the app, and they observed that the users would send or like stored a temporary note to their close contacts when they, you know, they wanted to just write something down quickly, not to forget it, a phone number, or buy peanut butter, for example, like it says here. They'd send it quickly to their friends, and they might even like paste entire paragraphs and tell their friends, "Oh, please ignore. I just want to remember something for later." So Viber went ahead and actually introduced a new feature in their app, a note-taking feature, even though it's, you know, entirely out of the scope of the app. The app is clearly a messaging app, but since users are using it for note-taking, they decided to introduce this section, which I thought was really interesting. Other ways of identifying how users use your product are through shadowing, so observing, you know, what they do, actually sit with them and during their work, for example, and try to be quiet and just observe how they use your product. Quantitative surveys can also be useful. And other tools such as Hotjar and Google Analytics can track where the user clicked, where they abandoned your page, where the experience went wrong, and whatever seemed to trouble them. Now here's an example of some user testing sessions we did here at SafeSize. Here are the photos of the session we did in our office here in Athens. We tried to test if the users understood the gate analysis process of our product that it offers, because it's actually the trickiest part of the flow. And we wanted to see if they could grasp the concept on their own rather than with the help of a sales assistant. Ideally, this testing would be done, not this testing, but generally testing would be done before the product has been developed and before, you know, you've made expensive hardware choices or mobile device choices or foot scanner choices like we have in our case. And studies have actually shown that people are more likely to be bluntly honest with you when you ask them or when you test your product on a wireframe rather than on your beautiful designs or on finished prototypes. It seems, you know, the less effort they feel you have invested, the easier it is for them to be honest and say what they really think about your product, and that is total rubbish. So test as early as possible. For our product, for example, we did find that some users, which are also our sales assistants, you know, they didn't understand certain features of our product that our product actually had, which was, for example, you know, saving the results you got of the shoes recommended. And they would use their own hacks, for example, taking out their phone and taking a picture of the recommended shoes they got in the end. So we try to find ways to make it more obvious that, hey, this feature already exists in the application, no need to take out your phone. But it's always very interesting to see how people really use your product rather than how you assume they use it. So then that's the end of the process, or is it? You assume testing has finished, you've gone back to your designs, you've done all the necessary changes, and then, you know, you happily hand off the design to a development team and wait patiently for the end result. Now, this all sounds very nice, but unfortunately, it only displays the UX design process and assumes that everything transforms into a beautiful product after the prototype is handed off to the development team. So X weeks later, the development team says the product is ready and you take a look. Well, if you're lucky, you take a look, because you might just see the end result before it goes to UAT or even worse, to market. And so you see it, but wait, that isn't what I designed. Now, things aren't always or hardly ever as smooth in the digital design process. So, you know, designers and stakeholders are disappointed by the end result. Heated conversations start to arise mainly on users versus system needs. Designers be like, this isn't what I designed. Where's my beautiful color sorting? Or the filters don't work as I designed them to. The pixels are off. Developers will be like, that's not possible to make. The system doesn't work that way. Or the database doesn't support the user interface layout. You should have asked us first before you designed that. Or that's not how the data is stored. Well, designers feel misunderstood. Developers feel the designer lacks the technical knowledge to understand their decisions, since they know the system best. But then as you start asking questions and try to sort things out to get the product as close enough as acceptable to pass the basic usability test, you realize, uh-oh, does this sound familiar? Have you ever come across the same issue? The physical data model governs what the UI can do. So one of the biggest issues I see and the hardest to fix is that the backend engineers create the physical data model in such a way that it dictates what the UI can and cannot do. And this is at the expense of the poor user's mental model. So the system's data model and the user's mental model are not aligned. So the user experience in the end is a big mess. Now, I've heard the phrase way too many times. That's not possible. The system doesn't work that way, all too many times. And I have the scars to prove it. But here's a radical idea. What if we're doing it backwards? Steve Jobs once said, you've got to start with the user, with the customer experience, and work back toward the technology, not the other way around. And this is exactly why we have to stop working as two separate teams, doing our own separate tasks, when in reality, at the end of the day, we're both designing and building the same product. 4 of the world's largest tech companies, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, they've paved the way for optimal user experiences. Users now expect systems to work like the interactions they have with these big 4. They expect, for example, to be able to search in Greeklish and get results as if they had just searched using the Greek alphabet, like they do in a Google search. Or they expect to swipe down on a mobile app and have the feed automatically refresh like it does on an Apple device. Most smart companies are copying these top mental models, and good for them, because that's exactly what the users need. They need the technology to behave like they expect it to. They don't want to learn new tips or tricks. And as Alan Cooper also said, the father of Visual Basic, he wrote in his book about face, a new user must grasp the concepts of the scope of the product quickly, or he will abandon it. Thus, the first order of business of a designer is to ensure that the product adequately reflects the user's mental model of his tasks. Keywords here are: ensure product reflects user's mental model, not system's mental model. So what's the solution? How do we solve this? Well, how about we learn to speak the language of the user? How do we do that? Listen to what your users want. Don't speculate. Engage them from the start. So as I said, as we saw in the UX process earlier, make sure you always conduct user interviews before you start proposing solutions. You might have your own experiences and you might have seen something somewhere that you think will work for your client or for your product, but assumptions are usually bound to fail. Test the existing solutions, gather feedback from customers, and empathize with your users. See where they really struggle. See where they really don't want to use your product anymore because it just frustrates them. Try to engage developers to empathize with your users as well. So I think, have developers themselves test the product as a user. Here at SafeSize, our CEO is constantly pushing all members of the product team to go out to stores, observe how people interact with our product, step on the foot scanner themselves, see how they will go about finding a recommended shoe in an actual store, not in the, not in the prototypes we have in the office, because it's a totally different setup. It's an eye-opener, and I really think it engages all members to think of the product more holistically, rather than from their own micro world of designing a feature or developing a feature or testing it. So also, watch the recorded user testing sessions from your UX team, or even volunteer yourself to be a participant of the product, on a feature that you haven't designed yourself, so that you don't know it very well. See if you can actually go through with the tasks the UX team sets up for you, and try to put yourself in the shoes of a user. Data modeling. Do the data modeling together with the UX designers. Sounds strange, doesn't it? But how about you sketch the data systems involved? Co-create the entity relationship diagram together with the UX designers. And that will depict all the data elements and relationships. This should be owned by the product owner or the business analyst. But make sure you identify all areas of potential constraints. For example, primary keys, mandatory fields, don't miss anything. Identify these all beforehand to avoid unpleasant surprises along the way. This diagram should usually be owned by the business analyst or a software architect, and should be created before the product development. Design your product approach such that it takes the high complexity and high return elements first. Don't leave out the hard and risky integration components until the end, when you find out you need to change the core, or you have already built something and you need to rewrite it in order to accommodate this new feature. So finally, when the UX designers are included in the data modeling, only then will we manage to speak the same language, the language of the user, because the data models will then support the user's mental model and not the systems. Thank you. Let's see if you have any questions. Sorry, I'm having a bit of technical issues here again. Okay, well, if everyone wants to contact me or, connect on LinkedIn, I'll be happy to chat. Thank you everyone very much for attending. Hope it was useful. Have a good night.